For this Smart Chat, Carissa went to visit Big Bethel AME Church, the oldest African American church here in Atlanta.
How did Big Bethel start?
After the Civil War and after the North sent all the troops in, then what was established here in town was the AME Church. The AME churches started 60, 70 years earlier, but up north. So after the Civil War ended, then they were able to come down south, and so that's how we got started in the early days. And then after moving around for one or two streets or one or two times, we moved here. So we started here in this location about 1920. So as I said in the early part of the conversation, we're the oldest black church here in Atlanta.
When did you become pastor of Big Bethel AME Church?
All right, I was appointed pastor in May of 2013. So I've been here a little bit less than 2 years.
How is starting a church like starting a business?
All right. Well, there's some people who argue a church is a business. Let me try to expound on that a moment. We're in the business of saving souls, bringing people to Christ, of helping people find religious values in their life, helping people grow.
Are churches owned by anyone like a company or business?
That's a different answer for different churches. So let me give you the AME answer, that answer for African Methodist Episcopal churches. We are all owned by something called the AME Church, Inc. And so we're all owned by the corporation. There is a corporation called the AME Connectional Church. But there's some churches that are not hierarchical, like for instance, a Baptist church. So let's say right up the street, Ebenezer Baptist, which is larger than us, then they're owned by the local congregation. In other words, is the local church owns them. So depending upon what church denomination you're in, then it has different people or different corporate structure.
Do churches help the economy like other businesses? If so, how?
Big Bethel AME Church here has about 7 employees. Now that doesn't count the part-time employees. There's another 15 or so part-time employees. So we have, like if you came on Sunday morning, you'll see about 5 or so musicians. And then on first Sunday of the month, you'll see another 4 or so, we call them orchestra people. So we have just musicians in the house, about 10 musicians on at least some Sundays of the month, and then 5 in others. So we have a lot of part-time people. So 7 full-time, about 10 or 15 part-time. As I said, at other things that we own, there are other employees. So this high-rise apartment that's behind us is 160 units. So we hire in what's called Bethel Towers another 10 or 15 people. At Trinity for the men, then we hire another 10 or 15 people there. And then so you put all that together, then it adds up to about 50 or 60 person.
Is it ever overwhelming or challenging being the owner or boss and the pastor?
Yes. Some things that come up in church, being the pastor, and the pastor is what's called the chief administrative officer, then you know, some things that have come up you've never seen before, or some things that have come up have never happened. And so you constantly pray to the Lord, give me direction, give me strength, give me the wisdom to do the things that I need to do.
What is your number one goal for the church this year?
The number one goal for this year is involving our development project. Is we have a lot of property that we haven't done a good job at developing the plan for what we're going to do with the property. And so hopefully by this time in 2016, we've come a long way with developing how we want to move forward with this property. As you know, Atlanta is a big city, and this area right here is a growing area by the fact that it has a streetcar and Georgia State is here. So the number one plan, if you had to say, Pastor, what's your top priority this year, is to develop where we're going in terms of our property development, which we own a lot of property. So where are we going with how we want to develop that property?
Who were your role models as you were learning how to run a church?
All right. My first role model was probably my grandfather. My grandfather was an AME minister. And so growing up as a young boy in Cincinnati, Ohio, I used to see him come by. And he never pastored in Cincinnati, but he would visit quite often. So I would see him and look up to him as a role model. And then, of course, growing up as a teenager, then I got pretty close to my pastor, who was there at the time. His name was Donald Newberry. The church that I grew up in was called Lee Chapel AME Church. And so those were very good role models. But God has sent me role models all the way through. Is I think back to when I went off to college, then I had role models. And then when I went to work as a faculty member, I had role models. And then even now, I have role models, or I guess you would call them mentors, that you get advice from.
What's the best part about being a pastor?
The best part to me is working with people and the relationships you build. And even over the years, I've pastored other places. This is actually the 8th church that I pastored in my ministerial career. So even during the years, you look back to people that you pastored 20 years ago or you pastored 10 years ago, then it's a blessing. So I look back on the relationships of the people that you've formed with over the years.
What's the hardest part about being a pastor?
Hardest part about being a pastor is probably looking at that you do everything that you feel you could do for a situation. And then the feeling that you could have done more. It's the feeling that you could have maybe worked harder to make this a success or work harder to move this forward. So kind of dealing with, did you do everything that God has asked you to do? And so sometimes that's frustrating for me as an individual. But, again, as you go through those frustrations, you get up the next day and you keep on working and doing your work.
What advice do you have for kids who may want to start a church someday?
What I would say for young folk who may want to be a pastor, then a couple things. One is you get involved in doing things at your church. Now, whether or not you call it Sunday school, or you call it the choir, or you call it the ushers, then get involved with as many things as you can, because as pastor, you're going to have to work with those people. You're going to have to work with helping the ushers with what their needs are, the choir with what their needs are. You're going to have to work in different capacities as you go through. So as you're growing up, then it's good to get some hands-on experience with those different groups. And then also note that once you go off to college, because in today's world, almost all ministers have to go to college and get training for that, then make sure that you go and pick out the best school that you can, and then get good training. And then in life, also make sure you got a good mentor. If you got somebody who you could look up to, that can give you direction, that you can bounce things off of, you can talk to about both your successes and your failures, and then see what God wants you to do. But as I said before, it's a great profession because, if you do it right, is you can help make some people's lives better. And to me, that's what is the lasting joy of doing this type of work.